let's do teams of the season. We're probably going to focus more on your La Liga team of the season to give people the insight on the players within your team, because generally people that listen and watch are Premier League fans, so we'll know the 11 that I'm going to put forward, but it's not my definite 11, it's just my 11 today, so please don't go after me. Right. Let's start because I think there's a couple of names here that people won't be aware of. Garcia, the goalkeeper at Rayo Vallecano, is that right? Espanyol, sorry, it was that game. That's why I was looking. Tell me about him, because I think that what I'm going to try not to do here is that it will be one where, like, with transfer season on the way, people go, "Oh, we'll have him."
Yeah.
No, that's the sort of. Sadly, that's the kind of food chain we're in at the moment. But why did you put him in as your goalkeeper?
Yeah, I mean, he's been super impressive for an Espanyol team who haven't really impressed this season, down near the bottom, but has made the most saves, I think, of any La Liga goalkeeper. Great reflexes. You said not to mention transfer season, but it's true that, reports have previously linked him with Premier League clubs. I expect he probably will be on his way in the summer.
Do you know which clubs?
Yeah, so I think he's previously, or at least it's been reported, that he's attracted interest from Premier League clubs, maybe Arsenal among them. I expect he probably will be on his way in the summer, because he does just seem too good for Espanyol. Was really good in the second division as well. As I said, great reflexes, always willing to come off his line. Yeah, he's been a standout player for them.
Okay, I've gone for David Raya, by the way, people. I think David Raya's an outstanding season, and I think the bravery that he has on the ball is at times pretty astonishing. It kind of takes my breath away a little bit at times, and coming to claim crosses, things like that. Obviously, is it Simon who's the Spanish number one?
Athletic, as well.
They've got some goalies, haven't they? The fact that Raya isn't your number one, that is outrageous. But yeah, I went with David Raya. So actually, do you know what? Let us know in the comments who's in your Premier League team of the season so far. Left back, intrigued by this one. I kind of put him forward I was on Saturday Social a while back. I can't remember which team I was talking about, but I'd had a look at Balde, and I wondered if there might be an opportunity for him to go. This was before Hansi Flick had come in. So Balde is your left back. He's gone to a different level this year. You've got him as your left back. Ratu, sorry, forgive me. As your right back. I put forward Trent, and I put forward Gvardiol. Do you think that and again, this might be one where it's a case-by-case basis, in terms of sort of overlapping versus inverted fullbacks, you've got Balde with 4.2 progressive carries per 90, 6th in Europe's top 5 leagues. Now, in the Premier League, we do have Anthony Robinson and Milos Kerkez, but that idea of those overlapping fullbacks, is that quite common in La Liga?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the kind of more traditional sort of fullback, I think. Koundé at Barca probably is an exception, although even then he's probably
hybrid, isn't he?
Yeah, and playing as a bit more of a traditional right back. I think it's fair to say Balde is definitely that kind of out and out left back, hugging the touchline, even if his role has changed a bit under Flick. But yeah, you probably see a bit less of that in La Liga than the Premier League.
One thing, I got a bit of heat for it, but then I kept seeing lots of stories for this. Do you think that Barcelona need to sell this summer? And if so, it's going to have to be someone somewhat high profile, you'd imagine.
Yeah,
someone like Balde, is that someone that's just he's like won't get touched, or could he get pinched? Because there's not a crazy amount of left backs knocking about.
Quality left backs, It's true. I think Araujo is the player who's often been linked with a move away. I mean, he recently signed a new contract, but we reported that he's got, I think, a 60 million release clause, which you expect might be attractive to some teams, particularly in the Premier League, you'd imagine. But you're right. I mean, in terms of complying with the financial rules, they will have to get rid of some players, you'd imagine.
Centre backs. I went for Milinkovic, who's just been outraged for Forest in a very specific style of play, and Virgil van Dijk, despite recent a tough weekend. Let's put it that way. Who did you go for? Oh yeah, so this is where I'm intrigued. You've got a couple of shouts here for athletic club players, because I did want to touch on them. But Inigo Martinez as one of your centre backs, he's got the most progressive passes for a defender in the top 5 leagues. 5 La Liga players compared to 4 Premier League players in the top 20 progressive passing defenders in Europe's top 5 leagues. Do you think in La Liga the centre-backs get slightly more time on the ball than in the Premier League?
I think that's fair to say, and I also think if you're a Barca centre-back, you get even more time on the ball. But I included Martinez just because I feel like Kubasi has rightly got a lot of the headlines for being this young, great centre back, and he has been brilliant as well this season. But Inigo Martinez is really the player who's been coordinating that high line for Flick. He's kind of been his general on the field. Bit more experience, I think, at 31, 32. I mean,
33 actually, I think.
33. There you go. He's aged even. And I think again, bit of a redemption story as well, because he wasn't necessarily a player who you thought was going to make the cut at Barca or become a kind of consistent first team starter. Again, registration issues as well with him, and yet he's emerged to become this real general on the pitch for Flick. Yeah,
he's sort of a hidden one, I think. Like sometimes with great teams, they'll have one player going, who's the last? I'm trying to figure the last player. I feel like Martinez is maybe going to be that one for this team if they do go on to do an incredible treble, which we've spoken about in the other podcast that we've done. Vivian, Athletic Club, big few weeks, months for them if they can get themselves to a Europa League final at their own stadium. The charge for a title, which would have been outstanding, especially with Nico Williams. There's been so much discussion about him. They are a really good team with some really exciting players, and you've got 2 instances of them, and that's not Nico Williams, by the way, who's not made it into this team. And Vivian is one of them. What makes him so exciting and great?
I think really, really solid centre-back, part of an amazing defence, only 24 goals conceded in the league, which is the joint best record along with Atletico Madrid. Made the Euros last summer for Spain, although didn't play much. He wasn't one of the starting options. But I think he's a really important part of how this Athletic side play, and he kind of sets the tempo from the back.
And how are they set, Athletic Club, in the sense of, I always intrigued by, obviously I love the sort of principles that they have, and I feel like they shouldn't be as successful as they are, because that they should be hamstrung by that somewhat. But they've got a lot of assets there that they could make a solid amount of money on. But they also got to be kind of careful with that in terms of don't sell too many of them. Otherwise, you're going to not have a team left anymore. Like, what is their general transfer policy?
Well, I think they're pretty well set because, ultimately they kind of call the shots a bit when it comes to, we saw it last summer with Nico Williams, so much speculation about a potential move to Barca. In the end, he stays put because, that's kind of his family. That's where he feels comfortable. And Barca would have had to pay, a crazy fee to bring him in. So I think they're in the driving seat, really, when it comes to their players.
I find it amazing he can still have that power. Like that he would not just go...
And still have this Basque-only policy and yet, win the Copa del Rey last season. They have amazing success. It's a pretty, pretty good tale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've got them down as winning the Europa League this year. We'll see if it happens. We're moving to midfield, and we've got 3 there. We've got Pedri, Valverde, and Sunset. Pedri ranks in the top 20 for ball recoveries per 90 in Europe's top 5 leagues, which is kind of feels a bit unexpected with 7.4 per 90. Does that highlight that physicality is kind of not an issue in La Liga, or certainly for players like Pedri? Because I think that's something that, if you think of Barcelona stepping into the Champions League, and ultimately that is your league against their league, could there be a feeling of sort of bullying physically that could occur with a team like Barcelona? But certainly with Pedri, that's not something to worry about, is it?
Yeah, I think he's got stronger. He's also playing a bit of a deeper role this season under Flick. I think he was more of a number 10 under Xavi, and that's changed. And I suppose I'm hoping that the real physicality from this midfield comes from Valverde and Sunset, probably Valverde especially, who I expect is going to be everywhere, mopping up after Pedri and Sunset.
Just quickly on Valverde, obviously, I've got Trent in my team, and actually I haven't revealed too much about my team. My midfield, I've got Tielemans, Gravenberch, and Caicedo. based really on performances this year more than just like the best three I can think of, because I think Tielemans has been absolutely outrageous for an Aston Villa team that's had a lot of injuries in midfield and changes in midfield. He's been superb this year. Gravenberch, so much has been spoken about him, even if his form has waned a touch in the last little period of time. And Caicedo, I think the price for him puts a lot of pressure on him, but I think he's been pretty outrageous for Chelsea, even if they've had their highs and lows as well. But going back to Trent as that right back, there's so much talk about him going to Real Madrid this year.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but be super impressed by Valverde playing as a right back in the Champions League recently for Real Madrid. In terms of Trent and the pressure of him going there, but the quality that he has and the deficiencies that are touched on so often, do you think Valverde is going to be a really, really important part of safeguarding Trent at times when it comes to the defensive side of it? Because he is an animal, and I love him as a right back. I actually think, I've said it a few times, I think if he would just said, I'm a right back now, he would be one of the best right backs in the world, because the ability to get up and down, the ability to drive with the ball, the ability to be press resistant, to win your duels, to put beautiful crosses in, to score a rocket here and there. Like, he's got all of that. Definitely. So much so that inevitably you want to kind of get him in midfield. Do you think when you reflect on Trent and that move and it occurring, if it does occur, do you think Valverde is a key part of that on that right-hand side?
Yeah, I think he could be important, particularly if you think about Alexander-Arnold coming into midfield, Valverde maybe coming out wide, in defensive transitions. I think that could be really important. And the key thing for Madrid, I think, probably is to get Valverde back in midfield, because as much as he's been great as a right back, it's kind of worrying that it's led to, the deficiencies or the weaknesses in Vasquez and Carvajal being out, for most of the season, has led to Valverde playing there. I think, there's a lot of excitement about Alexander-Arnold, and I think from the Madrid coaching staff, at least what we've written, is that they really do see him as someone who can help in defence, but also be that additional playmaker, essentially.
Yeah, just sort of like Henderson on steroids.
Yeah.
Just to say, with the Pedri ball recoveries, just to kind of give you guys a comparison here, in the same category, the players that are kind of around him statistically, Ryan Christie, Bentancur, Elliot Anderson, Andre. So a lot of players that are kind of, like you're saying, deeper areas, being either very switched on mentally or just really kind of physically impressive as well. Someone like Elliot Anderson there sort of jumps off the page for me. In terms of that midfield three, Sancet. A lot of people might not know too much about Sancet. He's at Athletic Club as well. He's got 14 goals and 3 assists in 27 appearances this season. He's averaging 5.3 progressive passes per 90. Compared with, by FBref, to Phil Foden. So one question, which I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it, is do you think they have similar profiles, Foden and Sancet? And second question, I've heard a few people say, and actually Jack Collins, I don't know if you know Jack, he was on here and he was talking about Man City maybe making a play for someone like Sancet. Do you think Sancet is the kind of player that could do well at Man City and in the Premier League?
I think he'd do well in the Premier League. I feel like he's more physically imposing than Foden.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
more direct. In front of goal, he's amazing. Sometimes it really does feel like you're playing basically a striker in midfield.
He's a big lad, isn't he?
Yeah,
much bigger than Foden.
No, exactly. And again, he's a key part of how Athletic play. And yeah, I definitely could see him thriving in the Premier League. I think those players who make the move across, you're often looking for. Yeah, that physical side it's important, because if you come over and suddenly get bullied, I mean, I'm thinking of some of the previous La Liga forwards who have gone there, maybe Aspas and didn't do so well at Liverpool, maybe didn't have enough of that kind of physicality about him, and that's another key difference between the leagues. Yeah,
you're right, that's true. And then the front threes. So again, I think this, for me, I'm trying not to offend anyone here, but when you see the two teams that we've got here, for you, there's 3 that aren't Real Madrid or Barcelona, and that's not you being lazy. That's the state of play. That's just kind of the state of play of the league to a point, in terms of the outrageous quality that those teams possess. And in my Premier League team, that based on kind of this season, we've got Arsenal, Man City, Nottingham Forest, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Liverpool, Chelsea, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Liverpool. A bit more of a kind of wider spread, which I think speaks volumes personally. My front three, I've gone for Rodgers, Isak, and Salah. For yourself, Rafinha, Mbappe, and Yamal. The superstar aspects are certainly there with your front three. In terms of the wingers, Yamal's averaging 5 take-ons per 90. I really like this stat because only Doku has more in Europe's top 5 leagues, and I think that says a lot when you just think when Doku plays, that's what he does.
Yeah.
He gets it, he sort of moves his leg a bit, and then he drives time again. And Yamal, when you think of him, you feel like he's so complete. You feel like he's got vision, he can pass, he can do all these things. The fact that he's having the same amount of take-ons as Doku per 90, I think shows the dominance of Barcelona and just how effective he is in so many different ways. If that's just, at best it's a half of what he can offer.
Definitely.
Maybe it's even a third. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And definitely that kind of tormenting, opposition fullbacks, which he's done all season. That's, yeah.
Have you seen him blink at all this year? Like in the sense of have you seen him struggle?
I don't think there have been many struggles, if any. Possibly the only one was there was a bit of question marks, which again, crazy to say it, but from some in the press, I think, about his finishing, and it's true that that goals for statistic you think could be improved. But having said that, he's also scored some absolute worldies, so it's how you want to look at it.
Yeah. I guess the thing with him is that you're looking at him often with players, you're going, okay, well, who do I attach him to in terms of sort of comparisons and inevitably, and the one that's going to be the one that will follow him will be Lionel Messi, won't it? At some point.
Yeah.
So it's one where it's so hard to attach yourself to that, even though a lot of his numbers at this age are outrageous. I guess the question is, how high is the ceiling when it comes to him in terms of those comparisons with someone like Lionel Messi?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the success he's already had suggests that he can be anything he wants to be. I'd be loath to say comparing to Messi because I think in Barcelona itself, people are kind of wary of that. Yeah, careful of that comparison. He's a bit of a kind of who sort of figure there. But I mean, if he leads them to the treble this season, already he'll be on his way to kind of legendary status there.
Yeah, I think the thing is that I don't think people can see what that could look like, a player that's as good or better than Messi, if that makes any sense. What's interesting here when it comes to La Liga, you've also got Vinicius Jr. and Nico Williams also in the top 10. And when you just broadly think of La Liga, again, if we're going back to those base ideas of just tapping it about, I think Athletic Club are a really good example of they really do drive down both sides and look to get that cross along the 6-yard line within both the Williams brothers. And then Vinicius Jr. on that left-hand side. But of course, Rodrigo getting involved. There's a lot of fun and flair and take-ons in the league with some really, really exciting players. Nico Williams is so exciting as a player. Would you say there is a similar blend between 1v1 wingers and those hybrid types who drift inside, both in La Liga and the Premier League? If you look at the players that we've got here, I've got Salah, who has just, his assists have gone through the roof due to the fact that he's quite happy to kind of cut in as much as drive down the line as he used to, because maybe he's looking for other players or his game's changing. He's lost maybe a yard of pace. But Rodgers as well, another proper 10, kind of playing in those areas as well. Those out-and-out wingers in the Premier League, aside from, I guess, Madueke at Chelsea. Well, Chelsea, Neto, Madueke, Nottingham Forest, it's more a sort of transition thing than out-and-out wingers maybe, and even Callum Hudson-Odoi is always trying to sort of tuck in. Off the top of your head, that wing play, and we were talking about more kind of functional fullbacks as well, would you say that's a marker of the La Liga at the moment?
Yeah, I guess if you look at Barca, for instance, the way that Rafinha and Yamal interact, Yamal's kind of coming in sometimes, Rafinha even is kind of playing in the number 10 position at times, even coming over to the other wing with Yamal. True. I think Balde offers that, outlet down the left that means that Rafinha can kind of go where he wants. Yeah, there's some interesting things going on.
Yeah, I think it's probably just as glaring the lack of wingers in the Premier League when I really, really think about it. That's fascinating. Let me know your thoughts on that, people. I'm intrigued. Strikers, Mbappe. We've got Isak, who of course was in Spain and has made his way over to the Premier League and done really well in that regard. Mbappe. Broad thoughts on Mbappe in terms of his adjustment period and with a few, some crucial games and I guess the defining games of the season's on the way. How do you think he's sort of fitted in a Real Madrid team and squad that has won Champions Leagues and been incredibly effective, and you've then sort of picking the best player in the world, supposedly, to come in there and fit and make it work? How's his journey been till now, and is he primed for some big games coming up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's kind of hitting form at exactly the right time of the season. I did, I suffered a bit with this decision, actually, because I really wanted Alvarez in there. Atletico Madrid, having come in from City and seemed such a good fit for Simeone's style of play, but you can't really argue with Mbappe's goals. I think, second top scorer after Lewandowski, has started really appearing in big games. I mean, that game against City for one. I think the thing with Vinicius was always going to be interesting, how they both interacted, given they both like to play off the left. It kind of has ended up being that Mbappe is more through the middle, Vinicius hugging the touchline a bit more, but, they kind of interact and change as well. It's not as balanced as the team last season. I think that's the interesting thing. Like, it probably has unbalanced them a bit. Plus losing Toni Kroos, which was such a big loss for them. But he's really kind of come into his own in recent weeks and actually equaled Cristiano Ronaldo's goal tally from his debut Real Madrid campaign with 33. So,
okay. On that note, obviously Mbappe at PSG, there's all the money you want. You're in capital of your own country. Why would you leave? Trent, we've touched on. Bellingham, of course, made the move when had Premier League suitors. Why is that big move to Real Madrid or Barcelona still so favourable in your eyes?
I think it's because they still, they remain, two of the biggest sides in world football, right? Arguably the two biggest sides, despite being in a league which, does sometimes seem totally divided between them and the rest. I think there's still that lure, isn't there, of playing for either the 15-time European champions or Barca with everything that represents. Two great cities as well. I'm sure that does play into it. And, they're always there or thereabouts when it comes to the Champions League, right? Despite being in a league, again, which maybe isn't as attractive as the Premier League, I think isn't as competitive, certainly in some senses, they're still going to be competing for all the major titles. I think that's a big plus.
Yeah, I also think it's a bucket list thing. I think that's a huge part of it. And I think the way that players think now, I think I said this, I certainly said it somewhere. I think they're looking at Michael Jordan, they're looking at LeBron James, and they're thinking about, what did I achieve? Not did we achieve? And you need the we to get the I, if that makes sense. But as part of that, Mbappe is a solid example. Haaland's probably a good example, though now he's signed a 9-year deal. Maybe that kind of washes that away somewhat. But when I think of like LeBron and he's moved from here to here, and it's kind of box ticking a little bit in the sense of like just highlighting your greatness, but also like having that experience as much variance as possible as a player.
Yeah.
And I think that's the allure of Real Madrid and Barcelona. It is still seen as the top of the tree. And I think from a Champions League point of view, I think what's really good is the fact that you see Barcelona and Real Madrid dominating that competition in, certainly semi-final stage for the next decade, surely, right? So both teams have got, haven't got too many old boys in there. It's only one or two, really. But to round this off, that the final question of the league itself, we've spoken about the financial constraints, and of course you've got that top two in La Liga. How do you feel about the league as a product over the next 10 years? Because I think it has I guess it's survived, obviously, and you've got some great teams. So, Sevilla winning European trophies, Atletico Madrid winning European trophies over the last sort of 15 years. But how do you feel about the health of the league as a whole over the next decade or so? What's in your gut? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, financially very sustainable, which is positive. You've also got these two great teams coming through who, you expect, particularly those forward lines. I think that is something which would surely bring eyeballs to any Clasico, those two playing off against each other, particularly given what's happened in the two Clásicos already this season.
Yeah.
Those big wins for Barca. In terms of the teams that aren't Real Madrid and Barca, I think there probably will be difficulties. Maybe we're going to have to see more clever coaching, really, which, is not a bad thing at all for how teams kind of address their lack of financial clout or lack of pulling power compared to Madrid and Barca. We might see more kind of multi-ownership groups getting involved. Just thinking about, Girona doing so well last season, this season not so much after losing players. We reported on FSG, the Liverpool group, they're interested in Malaga, who are in the second division. So there's maybe potential for that to become more of a thing and maybe more of a way of combating these big two. But in the short term, you certainly don't see anything else other than Madrid and Barca kind of streaking ahead of the rest. And
that's really interesting though,
these
considering, because one thing I was going to say was that that has been that's been the case for 20
a long time.
Long time, right? The other thing we spoke about earlier, this I always think about the kind of the journey of a good player, right? So let's say here's a good example. Say Conor Gallagher, or let's say Conor Gallagher. Conor Gallagher goes to Charlton. He's at Chelsea. He goes to Charlton in League One. He then goes to Charlton again because they got into the Championship. He then goes to Crystal Palace. He then kind of gets the opportunity and then is able to play. Another road of that is you go to Germany. So Birmingham, then it goes over to Borussia Dortmund, then goes to Real Madrid. We spoke about Dean Huijsen earlier. At Juventus, went to Roma, then goes over to Bournemouth. Now it looks like he's going back to Real Madrid. Those journeys are interesting, but in terms of the levels are still the same. Do you know what I mean? You're going up the ladder of pressure, of being important in those two different teams, but at the same time experiencing, developing in what you're doing. When you talk about the multi-club model, which is upsetting generally, isn't it? But you kind of understand it. When you think of, say, a team like Fulham and the amount of Arsenal players that they have, or Nottingham Forest, how they have Alanga, Hudson-Odoi, a lot of players, Nico Williams, a lot of players that have been elsewhere and were just underneath that, or maybe needed that little bit more time. But what it leads to is a Fulham team that can beat Liverpool, a Bournemouth team that can beat Man City and Arsenal and so many teams this year. With that multi-club model, when you have Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, instead of them giving their players to those mid-table Premier League teams, what could be interesting and have a ripple effect is the fact that if they do have those teams in Girona, and we saw it last year, didn't we? But Savio then goes back to Man City, or with Liverpool with Malaga. What it could do for La Liga is actually make it more competitive, because you've got these players that haven't reached the heights just yet, but the quality and the talent is there. And that could lead to a more competitive league for La Liga.
It could do. I think there is also the slightly depressing aspect of it, as you said, like some really proud clubs that, Girona, okay, they've been on an amazing journey, and I'm sure their fans are, and I know their fans are excited about that, and they wouldn't have been there probably without the involvement of City Football Group. But equally, this season, you've seen what happens when a couple of those players get picked off or get moved around the group, right? And
I'm not saying it's right. I just think
no,
it leaves a bad taste. You're right, but it could. I think it's when we're talking about the competition of it, it could be something that occurs.
Definitely,
yeah. Interesting. Thomas, thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you on Twitter or of course at The Athletic? And thanks again to The Athletic. But where else?
And then on X, Tomás_Hill, TIMAS.
Good, man. Mate, lovely to meet you. So nice to chat to you. Really appreciate all the insight that you've got. Guys, thank you so much. If you haven't checked out the other podcast talking about Barcelona in depth, make sure you go check that out. Give us a 5-star rating if you are feeling kind. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And we'll speak soon.